Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the major motion podcast, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Negroni, film editor for InBetweenDrafts.com. Will, why are you sneaking up on me like that? And what's in your hands?
It's an iPod filled with the songs of the Smiths.
The Smiths, and yeah. I was wondering why you rented out that WeWork across the street from the recording studio.
Yeah. Just trying to make it in a uncertain market, if you know what I mean.
Now, we did just put out an episode pretty recently for The Marvels. I talked about The Marvels with Alicia Grasso, special guest, and as a lot of the listeners already know, Will was too chicken to watch it, but that's okay, because Will, there's another movie we're talking about before we get to our episode about The Hunger Games, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which actually I haven't even asked technically. Are you going to skip that one too? Do I got to find somebody else?
No, I'm planning to watch that. Was I called a chicken for real? For not watching
Alicia did not call you a chicken, but I mean, I think she was just being a little bit nice. I think we were both thinking it.
Okay.
It's what you deserve for all this gruff you give me about the horror movies.
I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty proud of myself for putting my foot down and not watching The Marvels, but
I'm actually proud of you too. I hope it. I should point that out, actually.
Thanks, Dad.
You're welcome, son. We're talking about The Killer, which, to give this a little bit of context, so I watched this a while ago because it did have a limited theatrical release. We're talking about it now because it is actually, well, let me actually walk through the beginning of it. It premiered at Venice International Film Festival. Want to have that context, of course. And that was back in September. And then it got its limited theatrical in October 27th. So it's been a couple weeks since I've seen it. And now it's streaming on Netflix. And it's interesting because I think it started streaming on Netflix last week. It's kind of an interesting release because this is a big David Fincher movie. His last movie was also Netflix, but it didn't get that limited theatrical run. I think because of the time, it was Mank. And I think that we were kind of in a different place with movie theaters and streaming and things like that, right?
Well, it did go to theaters, but
it was super limited though. I feel like it was more limited than this run, if I'm not mistaken.
Perhaps. I mean, I with my family and a few friends, I rented out a theater to see Mank.
That's right. Yeah.
I know it did get a at least a partial theatrical run, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know why Mank came to theaters here, but not The Killer, but. I guess that's neither here nor there. I wasn't able to see The Killer in theaters, which is partially why this is coming out a little bit later, because I had to watch it on Netflix, which, I don't know. I mean, it's first world problems, but I was a little disappointed that I couldn't see this theatrically. I feel like Netflix kind of tends to do a disservice to their Fincher films and some of their other auteur films because they compress the image, and I feel like they put so much time and effort to making these films look cinematic, and then the hosts of these films don't really pay them service outside of the theater. And I think that was certainly the case with Mank. I think that's why people were a little bit more critical of that film, because I in seeing it in theaters, it looked gorgeous, but I could see why if you watched it on a compressed Netflix app or on their service, it would look not as good. So
yeah, I feel like I was lucky enough to, because I got to see Marriage Story, The Two Popes, and The Irishman, and a few other kind of Netflix movies on the big screen. And I think that does make a big difference in enjoying those movies. I think for me, at least. Yeah,
I mean, I got to see those, thankfully, theaters as well, as long as Pinocchio last year, which is one of my favorites.
I'm still very jealous about that.
Yeah. And I just recently watched White Noise in theaters at Repertoire Theater. They showed that, and I mean, that movie also, I feel like, probably was hurt by not getting a more prominent theatrical run.
Don't Look Up, I remember, had at least a month, sometimes it really does come down to how much hope that they have in the movie.
Yeah, and Glass Onion as well, I guess that was another prominent. That and Don't Look Up are probably the most prominent.
Yeah, Netflix, but Glass Onion was only a week, but I guess they did come back, didn't they? I'm trying to remember the Glass Onion drama.
I mean, it was only in theaters for about a week, but they put it in all the main run theaters, in a way that only that, and I think the Don't Look Up really got considered a wide release, because a lot of the times when it comes to these Netflix films, at least in my market, only a select few theaters either have the option or are willing to show these movies theatrically. Assuming, a lot of people won't show up because they're I'll just wait for that to be on Netflix, which is understandable.
I actually remember the first Netflix movie I ever saw in a movie theater. It was the Meyerowitz stories. Weirdly enough, random, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah, I watched that one on Netflix. I wanted to see that in theaters. Obviously, I mean, I think it's kind of a disappointment that the most recent Noah Baumbach movies have had very limited theatrical runs. But
yeah. I am sad though that that theater that I saw it at in San Francisco closed last February, and yeah, that was really sad. That was a landmark theater at the Embarcadero in San Francisco. Great theater. Saw a lot of great stuff there, and I was so sad when it shut down. But anyway, we're here to talk about The Killer. And you know what? Of all those movies, though, I think The Killer, I don't know if you'll agree since you only saw it on Netflix. After I watched it, I saw it at the Alamo Drafthouse, and I got to be honest, I at least compared to Mank and a few other things, I didn't feel like I had to see it in a theater. Like right afterward, I was kind of like, I'm glad I saw it in a theatrical environment. That was cool. But at the same time, I just kind of found myself being like, I would have been also fine seeing this movie. It's not to even speak of the quality of it, but for a David Fincher movie, for a movie where he's reuniting with Andrew Kevin Walker, his screenwriter for Seven,
right? It's
kind of like a bit more of like a not chill movie, but it's a little bit smaller in scope and scale than I guess you would expect for like, I'm going into a movie theater to watch a David Fincher movie, re-teaming up with Andrew Kevin Walker, and it's award season. I guess a part of me was sort of being like, oh, I'm going to be getting something like really big. I mean, getting something like Zodiac or something. I probably wouldn't have thought that if I'd watched the trailer, but instead I kind of got like no sudden move, which is cool. I liked that movie, but I definitely wasn't like, man, if only I could have seen this, like, this latest film from a really well-known director. Is always good at making stuff look good, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about the TIFF premiere, and I feel like that was just the general sort of vibe. Like, I think there was obviously a lot of buzz building up to it, and it seemed like the initial reaction critically from the film festivals was like, not negative, like it was positive, but a little bit more subdued. It was more like, oh, okay, yeah, it's good. It seemed though that like people thought it was going to be something maybe a little bit more grandiose and something a little bit more, thematically heavy or something like that. Like you're suggesting with Zodiac or Seven, but
and Michael Fassbender. I mean, he's a really great actor. So I know some people disagree. Some people are like, Michael Fassbender has always been a hack, which. Okay, you can say that if you want, but it doesn't make it right.
No, I mean, if anything, I thought it was a relief to see Fassbender in something like this again, because I feel like, well, for one, he's been on a bit of a hiatus. Like this and Next Goal Wins are like his first film since Dark Phoenix, which is back in like 2019. And then, like I saw Next Goal Wins prior to watching The Killer, and I don't know if we'll ever get around to doing a review of that if you're going to watch it. But
yeah. But he had a kid, like he and Alicia Vikander, they had a kid a couple years ago, and I think he's been kind of like, chilling. Like, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I will say, without getting to that film too much, I did feel like watching that film in theaters screening as opposed to watching this movie at home on Netflix. It was like, why is fate allowed me to watch a glorified Hulu exclusive on the big screen, the best possible presentation, but when it comes to a new David Fincher film like this one, I have to watch it in the comfort of my own home. A small burden to bear, but
I honestly don't know if I'm going to see Next Goal Wins. I think I'm too scared. I'm too chicken to watch that one.
I see. Yeah, and you're the bigger Taika Waititi fan than me.
That's the thing. Is like I've been running into some issues with all that, haven't I? By the way, I do have to shout out that Michael Fassbender is going to be in Kung Fury 2, which could not be more excited about his involvement with that. However small it could possibly be, it could be big. I don't know. I don't know much of anything about it at all, except that David Sandberg is on it. So. Yeah,
I genuinely forgot that was coming out.
I don't know when it's coming out
for a long time. Yeah. But anyway, let's talk about The Killer.
The Killer is, as we already said, new David Fincher, his latest film since Mank, and unless I'm missing something to do like a concert film, I don't think he's done anything else. But no, yeah. So as we mentioned, this is Andrew Kevin Walker. He and Walker did Seven together back in 1996 and or 1995 rather. Walker's gone on to do other stuff. He did a movie last year called Windfall. We didn't. Neither of us saw it or watched it, I want to say. He's done other stuff like The Wolfman, Sleepy Hollow. He's done a lot of like grim dark kind of stuff.
Yeah, I another Netflix film, Windfall. Forgot about that one.
Yeah, that's the one with Lily Collins, Jesse Plemons. I don't know why we didn't talk about it. I think it's because it was like a spring release or something and just kind of got lost in the shuffle. Jason Segel, too. But anyway, so this movie, first of all, I'll say I did like this movie. I want to get ahead of that. This is based on a graphic novel. It's a graphic novel that came out some time ago. It's a French graphic novel by Luc Jacamon. So yeah, don't get it confused with the other French, the Valerian and the Thousand Planets or whatever that Luc Besson did or whatever. This is way more chill. It's a little bit more gritty and down to earth. And this series is by someone named Matz, Alex Nolent, and illustrated by Luc Jacamon.
Yeah,
but anyway,
no Tin. That's what you're implying.
In this movie, Fassbender plays an unnamed assassin who has been assassinating people for a long time now. Kind of a veteran at this, and we kind of start the movie with him just doing like yet another job, and we kind of get introduced to his routine, like how he does this stuff. And one of the first things you kind of notice about this character, there's two big things you notice. First is that he has running narration. So he, lots of voiceover in this, which I think has been polarizing some folks. And when he does his narration, it's kind of like he's trying to explain to the audience, like, this is what it takes to be an assassin. This is kind of my day to day. This is what you have to do. It's like, don't trust anybody. Kind of some cookie cutter stuff, kind of some interesting stuff sprinkled in there. Then I think the other thing you kind of notice about him is that he's really a modern assassin. This movie does a lot to kind of emphasize like what an assassin in 2023 would be like, so he's not like renting out a hotel room to set up his sniper rifle nest. He's not even renting out an Airbnb. He's literally renting out a WeWork. That's one of our first kind of cues. He's a very like brand focused sort of assassin in the sense that he will literally like I go to McDonald's because that's like the best bang for your buck if you want some protein. He uses Amazon same day delivery service to, get a device he can use to dupe a key fob. Yeah. There's all kinds of like stuff sprinkled in there. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Like also like Hertz Rent-A-Car and like all these different like companies and services are, given I guess like good product placement in this film. Yeah.
But it kind of serves a purpose. It's a little bit like Baby's first movie about capitalism, I guess, in some ways. Like you can read a lot of things into it of like the consumer and, like this is what capitalism does. It's really not a pretentious movie, though. It's not really trying to be about much of anything except for kind of just like a character who appears to be neurodivergent, who appears to kind of be like kind of lying to himself with his narration. And it's more of a movie kind of unpacking like how a person could get to this sort of place. There might be some distance there. Like I could see some people watching this and being a little bit like, this is interesting. Like I'm enjoying this, but I've kind of seen this movie before. This has its own like little tricks up its sleeve, but it's not that remarkable in any specific way. I would point to like, there's a Tilda Swinton scene in this that it certainly stands out. And there's a big action set piece that's fun to watch. But I'll say, I didn't think the movie was killer. But what did you think?
Oh, I had a blast with this movie. And it's weird to say like that because I recognize that, like, to me, this is a highly entertaining, tense film. But I recognize that, like for some people, this might be a little slow, a little plotting.
They don't make movies like this anymore. I was kind of thinking about that. I was like, I feel like this will scratch an itch that I think you typically want scratched that other movies aren't doing.
Yeah, but it kind of reminded me of, do you remember the movie The American with George Clooney? And I
Vaguely,
think I mean, that was a movie, I feel like it's better than its reputation gave it credit. And that was a film where I think people were expecting that to be, a little bit more action oriented, a little bit more like pulpy. And that was just kind of recognizing that the life of a assassin is just kind of mundane and like very detail oriented and all that stuff. And I like that movie a good bit. I recognize that it's not everyone's cup of tea, but with this one, it's a lot more in that kind of pulpy vein. But I think what's appealing about it, especially as like a David Fincher fan, is that it seems to be him kind of taking the piss out of himself a little bit. It's hard to like talk about that more specifically without getting into some potentially spoilery aspects. But suffice it to say, yeah, like you said, like there's the character of that Michael Fassbender plays, the assassin character, is like you said, this someone is very meticulous. He's very detail oriented. He's very much trying to make sure all the ducks are aligned in a perfect way. And if anyone knows about the process that David Fincher goes into, he has kind of like this Kubrickian like desire to like be doing multiple takes and kind of get like everything exactly as he wants it to. And this movie seems to kind of recognize that like such a life is bound to be, if not unfulfilling, then doomed to fail in some respect, because the world doesn't work that way. And once something goes awry, as it does here, then you're kind of left on your own to like figure out how to handle that. And I think that's been, I don't know how autobiographical this movie is per se, but I do know that Fincher has kind of had some, projects like, he did a few things for HBO that never came to be, like that he was shooting and then like got scrapped, and then like Mindhunter got canceled prematurely. And I don't want to assume that that's what's at play here, but I just feel like he does really see at least some part of himself in this character, but he's also recognizing just the kind of buffoonery of this character. And there's a lot of like fun, intentionally kind of humorous details throughout. One such case is that all these different identities that he has when he like rents a car or gets a hotel or what have you are all different like sitcom character names. And because like they're like sitcoms that are going into like like the 60s or the 70s, a lot of the younger characters he's interacting with have no idea who they are. So he has like one that's like Archibald Bunker, but has like it's like a German spelling of it, and just no one.
That was one of the ones where I was like, this is kind of stretching incredulity a little bit, because I feel like that's like some of them I was like, that's funny, and others I was just like, oh, come on.
Yeah, no, I just think, I don't know. I do recognize that. I think it's a movie that's kind of putting the horse before the cart. Like, I think above all else, it is a fun, entertaining thriller. If you kind of like this brand of, character-focused thrillers, but I do see it more as being just like you said. There's the political stuff there, but it's not really highlighted on too much. It's there if you want to read into it, but it's also just being this fun, entertaining thriller, and it makes really great use of the kind of stoicism and the sort of I want to say like self-awareness of someone like Michael Fassbender, who can be like a little bit more pronounced in certain roles, but there is kind of this like edge to him. And I think a movie like Next Goal Wins was trying to lean into some of the inherent comedy of that, but way overplaying it and just making him seem miscast. Whereas with this, it plays into like a dry, kind of darkly wry sense of humor that I think really, really works well for Michael Fassbender. And it was just like a relief to see him do something like this that really plays to his strengths again.
Yeah, I think this movie really leans into also like what's kind of terrifying about Michael Fassbender, the way that he can like so easily like blend into a crowd, but also he's Michael Fassbender. Like, look at him, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so, yeah, that kind of stuff. I was like, this is such a perfect role for him, quite honestly. And he still has that physicality, even though like he's getting on up in years. But it's like there's a wariness to him that's really believable, because in another scene he'll be so visceral and like he'll have such an aesthetic to his action scenes. Like, I don't know how much of his stunts he was doing, but I bought a lot of them. I never kind of felt like I had to, like I had to like struggle to be immersed. Can I say one thing about my theater experience too, is because I was in a very awkward place with this movie. So if you don't know about the Alamo Drafthouse, the way it works is you buy your ticket and you pick a seat. And this was in a smaller theater, right? There weren't a ton of seats. There was only like 3 rows. And when I bought my ticket, there were like almost all the seats were still open. I bought my ticket and it was like kind of like not in the middle, it was in like the back row or whatever. And so I go into the theater, and like when you pick your seat, like you can't change your seat. Like that's it. And so when I go to sit down, and not like 3 minutes into it, like there's 2 other people in the theater at this point. This guy, this son of a, he literally picked the seat right next to me. It was
Okay.
so freaking awkward. And we were in an almost empty theater. And I'm watching this assassin movie with this dude who buys like a flatbread. And I'm like, why? Like, I think it was his first time going to the Alamo and he didn't realize how close the seats are because you're literally like in a couple seat. So me and this bro, like the waiter must have been like, oh, how are you two doing today? And I'm like, I don't know this man. Like, he's kind of cute, but I don't want to like,
Sure.
be in this situation. So I kind of watched this movie in a very awkward position where I'm just like, okay, but I still really enjoyed it. So that I think that's a testament to the movie that I was really sucked in, and I didn't find myself being like, get me out of here. Even though, I mean, I probably don't sound it on this podcast. I probably sound like, oh, John's extroverted. John will talk to anybody. No, John is very introverted. John likes his little bubble, his little space. And so, but I still had a good time despite all that stuff.
No, I mean, I think that's kind of fitting though. Like that's kind of similar to like how Michael Fassbender like interacts with all these characters. Like he acts like he's on no basis or that he's like fits in when he's clearly just, performing. But what you're talking about though seems like you lived that one Zach Galifianakis joke. I don't know if you remember this, where he's like, I like to go into a movie like 3 weeks after it came out when there's only one other person in the theater and sit right next to them. And then when they go, excuse me, it's like, shh, Keanu's talking. I don't know. It's a good throwback. Anyway, one thing I did want to say regarding the fights, as you're referring to, I think a lot of that kind of comes down to really strong fight choreography in the way that, it plays to the strengths of the actors involved. And I don't know, like you said, how much Fassbender is involved, but I think that comes to the strength of the way that Fincher can direct the scene, and also the choreographing or the choreographers can allow that to feel like real and present. But also,
Right.
I like the fights because they're so kind of bombastic and over the top. Like it seems to be kind of also kind of winkingly nodding to like something like the John Wick franchise and like the influence that they've had on like action movies and thrillers of late, where everything's a little bit more clean cut, everything's a little bit like very choreographed and very precise in a way that seems to be kind of paying homage to the kind of clean digital photography that Fincher is known for. And I like that, like when we actually get like a big fight like this, not only is it kind of broad and big and over the top, but it's like in Fincher's own way, kind of messy and kind of all over the place, and like not, it's not like super, directly choreographed in a way that like feels like the actors are performing their punches, but like that actually Michael Fassbender is like really getting walloped by this big guy. And yeah, I think that was, I don't know, I think that was really smart on his part. I also really like that this seems to be Fincher's way of kind of getting out of his comfort zone a little bit by allowing, like what would traditionally be very kind of precise and controlled filmography to represent the mindset of Fassbender's character. And then whenever like he's in an unsure or emotionally vulnerable place, the camera gets a little shaky, or it's on, not on like on a direct steady cam. It's a little bit more handheld. And it shows like us like in his shoes. It allows us to understand like when he's like in control or he thinks he's in control, and when things are kind of really going off the rails and getting messy. And I think that was really neat to see from Fincher's perspective.
Yeah, I was going to mention that I know some people thought the voiceover narration was a little much. One thing I liked about it was I always felt like it was dynamic. I always felt like as I was listening to it and kind of like peeking into his mind, his headspace a little bit, I was always interested on like the times when he would not listen to himself. Like those are moments that kind of stuck out to me a little, right? It's like, don't trust anyone. And you watch him trust someone. It's like, don't draw attention to yourself. He smashes a phone off the sidewalk. And I was like, all right, like I guess some people have just like a natural aversion to voiceover. And I don't. I think that it can be easy to mess up. That's all. And I think some people are just like, well, that just means it's a crutch, like it automatically bad, which I don't think that's hardly ever the case. I think voiceover can be really effective. We should do a voiceover right now.
Yeah. I think it can be effective. And it can be distracting. It kind of depends on the circumstance. But for me, I don't know. It kind of felt like almost like a parody of like a Paul Schrader movie. Like in the like all he's missing is like a whiskey and like a black notebook and journal. Like that's like he's kind of just writing his thoughts and like his manner, and like obviously it's like about this kind of misanthropic, dark, elusive character. But yeah, I think to me that's kind of where the humor gets highlighted, is the fact that like he acts like, okay, I have this all under control. This is what you need to know. But then he just almost instantly disregards most of, if not all of the advice that he gives either to himself or I don't know, whoever he's speaking to throughout the film. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was all effective. And yeah, I can see why it bugs people, but it didn't bother me.
Let's start with a negative impression. This is from Paul Harrington 1, gave it 2.5 stars. He said, I don't get the hype around this at all. Fight scene was class, especially the bit where he pulled the grater out of the drawer. I also really like that. Don't think this film will agree very well at all. Lots of current references, etc. going on. I was a bit disinterested. As Oysen put it, it's a thriller, but it's not that thrilling. Tilda Swinton was great as per. At the end of the day, I just didn't really care about what was happening. Stakes were low and nothing was shocking. We need to hold David Fincher to a higher standard than this mid. I think where I disagree is that, first of all, I think David Fincher is kind of allowed to make a mid movie. Like, I think that he's allowed to make a movie that, not to say mid, but a movie that is a little bit lower stakes, that is a little bit less like I do hold it as a criticism, but I also don't think he's trying to make anything grand. And for the movie he's trying to make, I think he really pulls it off. I think then you're just sort of criticizing his career choices, which we don't have a right to do that. It's like he can do whatever he wants. You know what I mean? He already made Zodiac. He already made Seven. He already made a bunch of like incredible movies. If he wants to make something a little bit like more like this, that power to him, right?
Let the man have fun.
Sure. I think to him, this is like, well, I could take a vacation or I can make The Killer.
Well, I think it's more like,
but I do think he worked hard on it. I'm, being a little.
Yeah, I don't think he ever half-asses anything. Yeah. But I mean, I think for him, it's very easy to see like, oh, this is a way to kind of, scale back a little bit as far as, Mank is a very personal, difficult film, I imagine, for him to make. It's like based on his late father's screenplay. It's a little bit out of his comfort zone. It's like a, like stylistically different.
So after that, he's like, I'm going to take a breather with this assassin revenge story that.
Right. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he, like I said, I think it works on its own merits, but I think it is kind of more commentary based than people are maybe giving it credit. Like, I think it is saying stuff, and I think it's especially saying stuff about the genre and the filmmaker right now. But
what do you think it's saying about the genre? Because there are certain things I picked out of it myself, but what did you did in that respect?
Well, like I said, I mean, I think it is just him kind of looking at what the influence of his career has been to like the current like action thriller aesthetic. And I think people get so like, I think he seems to be acknowledging, at least for me, that like people spend so much time replicating what they perceive as like good filmmaking or Fincher-esque filmmaking, but maybe focusing more on the style than the substance. And I think for him, he is kind of like, well, here's my way of doing this. But I'm like, but he's also kind of taking the piss out of it a little bit, being like, you expect this to be one thing, but then it's going to turn into this other thing and be a lot broader and more comedic. And to me, that this is fun. Like, it just allows the guy to, kind of acknowledge some of his imitators and also kind of play against expectations, but also just make at the same time, like a really cool, fun movie that you would expect from David Fincher in that respect. Like it's undeniably a Fincher movie. Like, it's not him going totally against the grain, but it also seems to be him also allowing himself to, play a little bit goofier, broader than he usually he does at this point in his career.
I agree with that. Sure. I one thing I mentioned in my review too, because, I gave the movie a lot of praise in my review. And, one thing that I pointed out was I like how this movie is a little bit like the anti-John Wick. It's not trying to kind of like so many other, I guess, action movies and thrillers these days with assassins and gunplay. A lot of them are trying to be John Wick. They're trying to be like, we're going to set up our own world. We're going to be like, there's this assassin world underneath our own. And this movie is just a little bit more matter of fact about it. It's like, no, this is the real world. Like, this isn't a fantasy version of the world. And that's the point, is that I think Fincher kind of being like, this could happen. Like, that guy, on the street, maybe you should be a little paranoid. He's kind of doing a little bit of like the conversation, going on a little bit there. So that is something I appreciate about the movie. And I do appreciate like what you're saying. Like, he definitely like makes this movie look like it kind of moves pretty nicely with I mean, Fincher's always got great cinematography, camera work going on. Eric Messerschmidt did this one, and I just think it's like he has a very human centric approach to the way the camera moves. And I think when you do that in a movie about bad people, it's especially like pronounced. And so, I I think that that's the kind of Fincher touch to what you're saying you're going to get with this movie. So you shouldn't expect something that's a little bit like, oh, anyone could have made this.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that that kind of reminded me, and you mentioned this sort of with No Sudden Move, is that weirdly this is probably the closest Fincher has come to making like a Steven Soderbergh film, something that is like, you know, like a genre exercise that plays in his style, but you know, like the material isn't inherently like very dense and thematic. Like he kind of adds that stuff by playing in like a different playground.
Yeah.
And you know, it kind of reminded me of like Haywire, which is the Soderbergh film that he did. That's also like about like an assassin, had Michael Fassbender in it as well. Yeah, I don't know. It just, and I know that Soderbergh and Fincher are very good friends, so I don't think that's unintentional in any respect. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems like you know, I can see why people are maybe calling this a mid tier or lower tier Fincher, and I don't know where it stands in the ranking of his films, but I don't know. I think it's a lot more fun and maybe even like smarter than people are giving it credit.
Yeah, I think it's what you're saying. Who cares where it ranks? Just meet it where it's at. That's kind of where I stand. This is from Som, who gave it 4 stars. So let's go a little bit more positive here. Som said, a revenge thriller is what I really admire. Michael Fassbender is absolutely perfect as the killer. He has the calm, yet a little panicky demeanor, which works for the character, showing he's a stone cold killer, but also a human at the same time. His panic, though, comes at times where he's about to do something bad to someone. The story is amazing for me. Being a Bollywood boy, a man going on a solo revenge tour is just appealing for me, and the fact that it's done in this grounded and realistic way is a plus. Though I wouldn't say this is Fincher's best because obviously the standard is set high with his other movies, this one still story-wise holds its own and is a great watch. Yeah, I think we've kind of touched on it, but I just appreciate, honestly, whenever I'm watching a movie with an assassin and they're allowed to make mistakes, and it's like, it's about that. It's sort of about like, what if the competent assassin accidentally wasn't competent for a second? Like, that's pretty interesting. Sometimes it's usually like, oh, something external happens, and it's like, how are they going to get out of this? Oh no, John Wick's dog died. But
Sure.
no, this movie's a little bit more of like, oh yeah, he just kind of messed up. And so like, here's everything that spirals out of control because of that. He's still competent, but then when you start the movie that way, you're like, I don't know, will he get out of this? He's messed up before.
Yeah, and I guess I should clarify that, like, obviously the John Wick films, especially the later ones, are very comedic as well, and they also allow John Wick to kind of get, you know, messed around and mess up and all that stuff as well. I think for me, it's more the imitators that this is kind of commenting on or criticizing. But yeah, I mean, I didn't think about it as a Bollywood film, but that is a fun way to look at this film for sure. Yeah, it is a globe-trotting, or at least state trot. Well, no, it's globe-trotting, yeah.
Globetrotting, yeah. Because he goes to the Dominican, yeah.
That's a fun way to look at it.
And then the last one I have here, this is from Hecate 13. Hecate 13 gave it 4.5 stars. Very positive review. So here we go. They said, hearing the bad mixed reviews bad/mixed reviews by so many, including some of my friends, I was prepared for this to be a disappointment. Instead, I just watched probably one of my favorites of the year, up there with Oppenheimer or Killers of the Flower Moon. This movie is brutal, but at the same time is stupid as hell, and it knows that. We see how easy it is for the killer to kill. The name changes, the recognizable brands like Amazon, Starbucks, and even Wordle all add up to the funness of it all, the funniness of it all. How effing easy it is for the killer to use these things as a distraction and become a menace. At the same time, however, this is terrifying because of how real this is. Some people criticize the film because we don't see enough about the killer's life, but frankly, Mr. Shankly, I think it adds to the overall ambiguity of the film, as well as the character. Also, this will be me if I continue my Spotify premium for another year. Very fun review there. And yeah, you know, I think that's really astute that, like, I did see some people being like, we don't get enough about the killer. We don't get his name. What's going on with the girl? No, that's not the movie. You're supposed to be learning about him through action. That's the thesis of the movie. And again, I think it's just one of those things where people are like, I want the movie to be like this. Please be like this. Right. And it's like, well, sorry, it isn't. Like, you know, and that doesn't mean you have to like it, but also you should criticize it for not doing the thing that you wanted to do.
I mean, you do get like little breadcrumbs. Like you learn, like, I mean, you know, it's his wife, and then you learn like,
or girlfriend,
or his partner, and then you like learn that he was going to be like a law student, and like you get like little things throughout. But I don't really think you need, because he's like someone who's supposed to be, you know, kind of without a proper identity. Like he's shifting through place. And if it got,
it's like if we got the name of, it's like if we got the name of the janitor from Scrubs. It's like,
sure.
well, what did that do?
I don't know,
Away the fun.
I mean, it just kind of bogs it down, I think. I mean, unless, they found a organic way to include it into the film. But yeah, I don't think as it stands, I don't think the film is lacking because of that.
I do also agree. Like this does have dad movie energy, and I know they reference Oppenheimer and Killers of the Flower Moon, two of 2023's other, dad bro movies, I guess, and nothing negative about that. We've said many times in this show, we love us a good dad movie and movies that kind of revel in the the testosterone of it all. Obviously, a place for that. But okay. That's all I had, and I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. I'm glad we were able to squeeze it in. I know the release made it a little trickier to talk about it, but now let's see what the critics have to say. Everybody cares about the critics, right, Ashton? Sure. 235 reviews counted on Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes game. What's your guess? What do you think?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to say 84%.
86%. That's actually really, really close. I was kind of like, is he going to kind of go too low on this? I thought you might be going to the 70s, but no, well done. 86. So only 2 off. And then for audience score, we have 1,000+ ratings. What do you got?
That's trickier. I'm going to go one higher. I'm going to say 87%.
Ooh, unfortunately, this is where I think the audiences are a little bit more like, This I asked for David Fincher. I didn't get it. This is a 61% audience score. Yeah, but it doesn't have verified ratings. I would bet this is going to fluctuate a bit. Movie just came out on Netflix a week ago. I think it's probably still going to find its folks and probably trickle up. Who knows? We don't have a cinema score, but we do have Letterboxd, of course. And let's see. I actually haven't seen how many people have watched this so far or logged it. Yes, we have 276,000 logs on Letterboxd. That's way more than I was expecting. Holy cow! That's way more than like Marvel's was a couple days ago.
Well, it is like people are watching it. Like when I play like the #1 movie on Netflix right now, like it's being watched.
I guess people just aren't putting it on Rotten Tomatoes because I guess people do still kind of think of that as like theatrical stuff. But yeah,
this is a Letterboxd movie. if
that's a good point. Yeah. What do you think the average rating is though?
3.6.
Ooh, Will Ashton. I can't remember the last time you called the Letterboxd one perfectly. Well done.
Is it? Oh,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Because I was going to do 3.7, but I was like, it seems a little too high. But yeah,
no, you nailed it.
Cool.
Yeah, and then we have some friends of the show who like this as well. Isaac Feldberg gave it 4 stars, and he can be a little bit of a stickler. That's a really high review from star rating from him. Love to see it. Ryan Oliver, friend of the show, gave it 3.5 stars. I know Emma Sasek reviewed it, and so but I don't see her yet. Oh yeah, there we go. She gave it 3.5 stars as well. So yeah, we had a lot of critic folks who saw this at TIFF, and they've been kind of saying like, "Hey, look out for this one. You're probably gonna like it."
Yeah, I mean, I would love to talk about it more. I was definitely curious to hear why you thought the character was neurodivergent, but I mean, I know we're running short on time.
Yeah, I had to throw that right at me at the very end. Why he's neurodivergent? I think the way that his social interactions, the way that he connects with people, and it kind of reminds me of experiences that I've observed in both myself and other people who are self-described as neurodivergent. Look, it's a total spectrum, and you can't always say 100%, right? But I just kind of got that energy of like that's the intention. That he, is somebody who, it's not that he doesn't pick up on social cues, because I think that can be a misnomer of like, oh, people who are neurodivergent, they don't know how to, like, no, if anything, they're people who really can understand social cues because they have like a more logical like approach to them. And so that's kind of where I got that sense from the character. I could be off, but that's just kind of how I read it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. That's not a thought that crossed my mind. It's interesting, but yeah. Thanks for clarifying.
I always want to be careful because I know some people that can be, interpreted as a little bit of, it can be, some people can say that that's not a good thing, that characters in movies shouldn't, take lightly, that sort of thing. So I do think it's important to stress it.
Yeah, I mean, I think other people, I don't think you're as blasé about it as maybe some other viewers or critics might be, but yeah, I just
watch yourself though.
Yeah, it's just generally something that didn't cross my mind, but I'm not saying, it's not there. I'd be curious to rewatch it with that in mind.
That's probably the first thing I would probably ask David Fincher about if I talked to him personally. But anyway, next movie we have on the slate, we're going to be talking about The Hunger Games, A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. There's some other things in the wings. I know we want to talk about All of Us Strangers at a certain point. We'd love to chat about it. We've both seen it at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll see Thanksgiving. I missed my screening and I do want to see it. I do want to talk about it. I think that could be a lot of fun. And Saltburn. Saltburn is still on my list. Saltburn, The Holdovers, May, December. There's some great stuff out. May, December, the Todd Haynes film. Review of that is on In Between Drafts now from Allie Johnson. I have been struggling to make screenings because I've just been very busy. And I know you've been busy. You just had a film festival in Pittsburgh. And so you've been kind of watching lots of stuff, but like it's award season's in full swing and we got all these things in the week. The Curse is out. I haven't watched an episode yet.
Yeah, Priscilla and The Anatomy of a Fall. There's a lot of stuff right now.
There is. And so there's no shortage of good things. Now, I know we don't always get to everything, and we always want to listen to you all. So if you ever want to connect with us and chat with us about stuff you want us to at least mention on the show or talk about, we do have a Discord. We don't always hype it up, but we do have a Discord it's the In Between Drafts Discord. It's linked. And we have a Cinemaholics channel there, and so I'm always checking the Discord, and I bring things to Will's attention. He doesn't always check the Discord, but I'm happy to loop him in on whatever may come. And of course, we have our email as well. All right. But that's it. Did it.
All right. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone. From the Internet of California, I'm John Negroni.
From the Internet of Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.